Okay, well, in this session, I want to talk about getting focused. How you take the ideas that you may have for new marketing content, for new advertising, for new events, or whatever you might be thinking of doing, and make sure it's tightly focused and will appeal to your Maria and Marcus. What are the key things we have to think about? Okay, as I said in the last session, a lot of marketing is really about rejigging and rearranging those sort of 5 buckets of marketing content that I talked about there. And the important ones to get right first are key value and the brand ID. And I'm going to give some examples so you get maybe a better idea of what those mean. The other bits, the proof of value, which is about reassurance, the info and the facts and the news and promotions, you can be a little bit more creative with, but they've got to align with your key values. So let's get into it and talk about what some of those things are about. To do that, I'm going to look at a local Wellington craft beer company that I rather like. And just so there's no misunderstanding, I have no shares in this company. They haven't sent me any of their beer, although I live in hope. But they are still a very interesting company. They're a small company called Garage Project. And they started a few years ago in a small garage that they'd redid, and they've managed to spread around the country quite successfully, taking on some of the bigger players and making a reasonably premium priced beer that sells rather well. Why I like them for our purposes is that they illustrate that a brand ID is much more than just a logo or some symbol or a tagline invented by a committee or whatever else. The idea of your brand identification, whether you're a small store or a major company, is to have a consistent feel, not exactly the same statements or exactly the same logo all the time in the same way, but to have a consistent feel so that you're identifiable. To think about how your product naming and your variant naming reflects that feel and helps people understand who you are. How the location, whether it's a website or a physical place, looks and feels. The style of your packaging, colours and range. Now, if you look about what happened with Garage Project, their brand ID is not so much about their logo or having the same colour. In fact, they deliberately use a different pack for each variant of beer that's quite different. They have a different colours, slightly different style, slightly different fonts, but they're very careful that the feel still fits with their general image and says Garage Project. Their brand ID encompasses a story. They have both in their minds and all their marketing materials or on their website this idea of a story about 3 friends, 3 mates, 3 blokes who got together and decided to make some really good craft beer, and they found a derelict garage, and that derelict garage they've painted all these lovely colours and interesting colours that you can see in this slide with wild pictures of strange animals and beasts and things. And that story gives a certain kind of emotional feel to their thing, as being experimental, being try hard, being someone who's trying to do things differently. Now, if you think about it, one of the useful exercises when you're looking at any kind of marketing material is for your own business to try and imagine other businesses, Maria or Marcus. What kind of person, target audience, and what emotions are they trying to play on for their person? Okay, I've talked a lot in previous sessions about this importance of identifying what the key value is, the thing that is going to underpin all your messaging. And that has to be something that matters to you, that you can deliver on and you believe in, but it's also something, importantly, that matters to your Maria. So you have to have your Maria in mind when you're identifying the key value. And the big reason why that matters so much is that if you look at successful brands in a very real way, they don't just state their value, they live it, especially in small and medium businesses. Let's take this as an example. And I should, I guess, give a disclaimer when I'm talking about Garage Project. I haven't talked to their executives, so I'm kind of implying from their marketing and advertising what I'm guessing is their key values. But anyway, it's a good story. If you think back a few years, craft breweries often focused on things like quality, ingredients, taste, uniqueness of taste and things like that. And especially that they weren't the corporate bad boys. They weren't the people that were just mass producing and dumbing down beer and delivering billions of gallons of piss water, basically. So they were making themselves seem a little bit more special. And these kind of became what I talked about before, the hygiene factors of craft beer. Now, Garage Project, if you look at their material, their packs and their advertising and how they display themselves in stores, they imply those values. They don't come out and say, we really taste really good. Hey, we're not the corporate bad boy. It's more about implying these things. You'll find that they're trying to get a feeling across of having just an amazing range, something that will suit any occasion or anybody, a lifestyle. It's fun. It's for the hipster in you. You'll be part of the great hipster tribe if you use our beers and drink our beers. It's experimental. You can try something different every time. So it's like, be cool and have fun experimenting. So that's an emotional set of values, not just sort of functional and rational ones. And all those emotional values are supported by the product, its look and feel, as well as the messages that they put across. So the task of us as marketers is to get beyond generic descriptors in our values and brand IDs, to get at some of those things that emotion. Imagine Maria as the kind of hipster young woman who wants to try a different number of beers. What's the emotional values that she's going to do? She's going to feel a little bit more experimental, a little bit more fun, a little bit more connected with other people like her when she grabs at that beer. But that value is implied, not merely stated. Okay, I want to look at one specific beer variant of our friend's Garage Project, and it's this wonderfully named Party and Bullshit. And you start to look at these elements of this beer, and you can see its name, Party and Bullshit, and you can see the style of it. Now, if you compare this to an earlier picture I had of one of their beers called Crisp Beer, which also has a colourful pack, but it's much plainer, you can see how they're using their name branding to get across slightly different ideas. That maybe they're thinking of somewhat different Marias for each of these brands, or different occasions that Maria could use them on. But they've got the same general feel. The names are literally no bullshit. They're telling you exactly, one beer's crisp, one's for partying. There's the feel, although the colours and style are different between those two variants, they're recognisably of the same family. They're obviously fun, they're intense, they're obviously marketed at a certain demographic and type of person. And then that's also reflected in the product description. So what is it? It's a hopper popper of a beer packing in intense mango, tropical fruit, hits from the big US, big guns and so on. It's tasting note, it's exceptionally drinkable and really fun to have in the house. So it's putting a style, that kind of fun, hipster, partying style, or whatever you'd like to call it. And that is all kind of aligned to that kind of emotional value that I think they're trying to get across in all their products. I guess the point is that your brand ID doesn't have to be about having this sort of absolute consistency of logo, but it is all about having consistency of style and feeling and approach. Okay, so your brand value and your brand ID is where you get across the absolutely critical emotional and style components of your brand, what you really need to leave people feeling about your brand. Now, think back to that differentiation exercise. Think about those things we gave 1 tick to. Were the things that were perhaps hygiene factors, things that you kind of have to have in the category, or are of secondary importance to your customers or consumers. It's likely that in some parts of your marketing material, and as you develop it, you need to offer some reassurance on some of these key things. I mean, if you're making child swings, it's that there's going to be safe. If you're making a beer that's going to have a taste suitable to me, that I'll probably like. Look now at the Party and Bullshit and how they get these proofs of value, these secondary ideas across. You'll see that they say, hey, it's got these kind of exotic sounding hops, Simmer and Mosaic, it's bigger and juicier than its bitter West Coast counterpart. So I've got a kind of idea of, a little bit of an idea of its flavour. It's not going to be too bitter. And then they tell me the tasting notes, it's got all these interesting, and it's really exceptionally drinkable. And they're just kind of stating, you know, it's going to be good, it's all right. And that may be as near as far as you need to go with some of these secondary promises. Just say, no, it's all right. Because the people already like you, because they are picking your beer, because they, you know, they're interested in it because of its style and its appearance, and it feels like fun. You just want a little bit of assurance that you're promising them it's going to be okay. So they've got a little review on the bottom of this saying, great drink, easy to style, from some beverage review person. And those are just little reassurances to add to it. The other thing to note about it is how simple they describe things. They're not going into tons of details about everything about the beer, exactly what's in taste, what is. It's just a simple, reassuring description. And also those descriptions are in their own language that will appeal to the target audience. So the style of how you describe those secondary promises shouldn't be dry and technical. It should be aligned to your core message and value. So you probably need to think about what reassurance your Maria needs to make her feel okay about taking that step and grabbing your version of Garage Project beer. Okay, but what I can hear you saying almost through the internet to me now is, yeah, Alistair, all you marketing experts, you talk about the exciting categories, the Apple computers and things of the world, and a fancy craft beer company or whatever. Beer's naturally exciting to many of us. What about, I'm just selling really basic products. What about fence posts, you might say to me? Well, what about fence posts? And it's true. Some categories have more buzz about them, craft beer or whatever. They also have more competition. It's much harder for a company like Garage Project to differentiate itself from others in many ways because they've got so many competitors. Many of the positionings that people use, things they say about themselves, have been said before. In a more boring category like fence posts, it may not take that much more to stand out. No one expects you to be terribly exciting, but if you're just a little bit different, just a teensy bit exciting, then that's good. So the same principles apply when you're doing commodity or more generic products. Try and think beyond the generic descriptors to what's behind Maria names. Sure, a farmer needs durability in his fence post. What else do they need? What else can you think of? So to give a small example, there is in fact in New Zealand a company called Future Post, which immediately implies it's going to last for the future and has something different about it. And they advertise themselves as a better performing, longer lasting post, which is fairly generic. After all, most fence posts, I guess, would claim to be longer lasting. They put a subtitle, that's also better for the environment. So just that small little differentiator. And they describe it as being designed by a fencer, built for a farmer. And they point out that we turn domestic and commercial plastic waste into premium fencing products that perform better for longer. Now what they've done is taken a differentiator based on the environment. Now I don't know to what extent farmers will pay extra for that particular thing. After all, if you've got to put all your farm and fence posts, cost is going to be a major decision factor. But if you're deciding between old wooden fence posts from a company called Joe's Fence Posts Limited and something different, then that environmental aspect may well be a differentiator that may help you think about it. After all, farmers today are under pressure, both moral and personal, and from environmental activists to be doing more about the environment. So it has an appeal. It may be a secondary appeal, but you can find a differentiator if you think about your product and its nature and how you describe it and yourself. And that can happen for the most generic of products. Okay, so what I want you to get out of all of this is that you need to focus your marketing, firstly, around those things that we've talked about that are key to your Maria or your Marcus. What are the things that she really finds important? And among all those important things, you need to distinguish between what are basic and generic to the category, the hygiene factors, the taste for beer, the durability for fence posts or whatever, and what are some ideas that will be differentiating. And those differentiating message, that main message that is, you know, why we are different and better or whatever, and why that matters to you, that's the thing. And it's not just words, it can be a feeling or an emotion that you get across in all your packaging and style. That's what's got to constitute the bulk of your marketing effort and your investment and everything that he or she sees. So when your Marcus or Maria views you, think about, are they noticing that differentiating message, that differentiating feeling, or are they getting tied down in messages of detail? Now, I'm not saying that you don't, as I said earlier, have to offer some, you know, reasons for reassurance about the basics. Yes, they may have to be secondary messages in there. And yes, especially if you're an expensive category or a commodity category of certain, you may need some evidence that you're really different and you can really meet your claims. And there may have to be things that are real details that they drill down to on your website. But the bulk, the guts of what you're doing, the investment effort has to go into getting that central message across. Yeah, it should be the bulk of your brochure or your advertising or anything else that you do. It's the thing they've got to notice out of the corner of their eye. Yeah, so that's fundamentally marketing lesson number 8. Be clear about your brand ID and your core value proposition and base them on what matters to Maria and is a good differentiator. Try and not make it generic. Think about emotional needs and desires and get a consistent approach in terms of look and feel. You don't have to be absolutely consistent about every letter and logo in the same place and everything, or all of that sort of stuff. But make sure the general feeling is across all of the things that you do. And make sure that your product and service supports your core values. So, that's Marcus 8. Make sure your ID and core value proposition dominate your marketing material. Okay, a reminder, if you haven't done it already, do create a skeleton set of materials, images, words, bullet points, what suits you, for each of those buckets, and particularly the key value and brand ID. Try and get your head around what those are for your brand, service or product, and then think about what kind of proofs of values, what kind of facts will she need to drill down to on your website to finally be convinced that you can deliver, what kind of news and promos excite your Maria or Marcus. Okay, feel no panic about this slide. I acknowledge it's the kind of one that no one should ever put in a PowerPoint. I'm just putting it up because if you download the text file, the PDF that comes with this, I've got a few more details about, just what I mean by a value proposition and a brand idea or info or facts. Look, the key point is, however you like to do it, collage, mind map, sticky notes, bullet points, just try and get a few ideas down under each of these headings. To encourage you to do it, let me say that if nothing else, even if you're not making up your own marketing material, you're employing someone else, you're going to bring in another expert or a graphic designer. If you've gone through this exercise, you've got this feeling yourself, you will A, make their job more easy, B, you'll be able to distinguish much more easily what you like or dislike about their recommendations. It'll save you bucks, lots of bucks in the long run. So do this and you'll be much more prepared as a marketer to make better use of your business. Okay, so before you get down too much into that exercise and too much depth, hopefully you're brainstorming it as I've suggested. But what I find is that when people work on this, when I'm doing workshops or whatever, they tend to start thinking about slogans and taglines. I don't know why. Look, I want you to think of yourself as a marketing artist. You're trying to paint a picture of the emotions and style. You're trying to get across a mushy impression of your brand, as I keep saying. And if you start with a slogan or you start with a tagline, you tend to get worked up about the exact words rather than the exact feeling that you're trying to communicate. Look, I'm not as anti-taglines and slogans as perhaps I am. You heard me earlier talking about mission statements. I think maybe only 50% of taglines or slogans are useless drivel. Sometimes they're quite useful, particularly if you're in a more commodity category where very little distinguishes your business from another one. It can be useful to have a clever tagline or slogan that will kind of remind people about you. Yeah, that's okay. If you do a slogan, though, make sure it's not kind of one of those kind of designed by committee things that sounds really generic or as cliche. It's got to reflect your brand ID and key values. Think about it as having created a picture of your brand, the portrait of your brand that's about the colours and the emotion of it, and then adding that tagline and slogan as kind of your signature at the bottom of it. And I guess the other thing about that is that if you're doing the tagline and slogan, it's not about you or your expert just coming up with a good idea. It's got to suit your Maria or Marcus. And the more you can talk to your customers and see what they think about such things, the better. Okay, so perhaps one final thing to think about when you're thinking about creating any kind of marketing material, whether you're planning a new event or whether you're creating a brochure or anything you're doing in marketing, ask yourself two key questions. First of all, as a small or medium business, it's really difficult to market things that you actually don't believe in. So just because someone's come up with an idea that sounds really good or a really cool looking brochure or whatever, do you believe in it? And can you deliver on whatever promises it's got? So think about your own reaction. Do you believe in it? If you say your fence post is really durable, do you really believe that, and can you deliver on that durability? And the second one, the really critical one, the one I want you to ask yourself about every little bit of your marketing material is quite simply, does your Maria or Marcus give a shit? Do they really care? Is that message, that feeling that you're trying to get across, is the style, is it going to bore them or is it going to interest them and intrigue them? Because if it doesn't, you're just wasting money. So ask yourself those two questions, and if you've been doing as I'm suggesting and building up a better and better picture of your Maria and Marcus, I think it'll be really helpful to you. Okay, let's do the self-rating thing again. Just really try and think about Maria or Marcus, how you present your brand and ID and core value, thinking just generally, is it clear, is it consistent, is it relevant? Or if you haven't developed those yet, are your ideas for them clear, consistent and relevant? If not, you've got to upgrade it. you know, and think about it in more detail. Go back and relook at some of those exercises and try and find something that makes it clearer, get your idea about value and differentiation clearer in your head. And I guess, as always, you know, if you're giving yourself 3 stars, get some independent ratings as confirmation, and, you know, keep monitoring your performance on that. Okay, it's really important you have these 2 things, this ID and core value, really clear. Okay, hopefully you're now pretty clear about, or at least have some ideas about what you should be saying about your brand ID, and you've thought about the kind of value you want to offer to your Maria or Marcus. In the next session, I want to go on a little bit more about how you should be thinking about how to deliver this, and I hope to give you some instruments to make you a little bit more creative in thinking about how you can engage with your customers. And I want to convince you of why you need to get at them a bit more often, to hit them over the head, as it were, 3 times, so that they really get your message.